Welcome everyone. It is our pleasure and honor to have you. My name is Mary Kaplan Schweitzer, and I'm the executive director of the Dallas Jewish Historical Society. So it's warm and welcoming to see so many faces that we have seen before. Of course, I don't think I'm on the live stream, but we are live streaming and recording this as well for posterity. This is a series of events that we've done in the community in partnership with the JCC Senior Program and, of course, with Dallas Jewish Funerals. And I know that I just want to say thank you for joining us, and that Zane has graciously given up his time and his staff. So please, if you will join me in giving them an incredible warm welcome, and I'll let Zane take it away.
A lot of familiar faces. Thank you for coming. Really appreciate it. This is a topic that is oftentimes we get put between a rock and a hard place. You know, when families come to us and they want to cremate, or half the family members want to cremate, half want to bury, and then you get different religious aspects in it, and we try to stay neutral, because at the end of the day, we can't legally, force anybody to go one way or the other. And so the best way we feel like approaching this is having different panel discussions, on a lot of these hot topics, and cremation is a hot topic. Right now, the cremation rate in Judaism has increased to over 20%. So it's a trend that is going in that direction, and I can't really speak for why that is, but I'm really grateful for the panel that we have, because today you're going to be able to get multiple different perspectives on cremation and Judaism, and answer or ask any questions. I am going to try and moderate as much as I can. I know that we might get a little off topic, but I do have a list of about 15 questions that were pre-submitted. So I'd like to get through those, and everyone up on the panel has a copy of those questions, so that we can at least start things off smoothly. When we get through those questions, if you have additional questions, then absolutely we'll open it up for a Q&A session. One other thing real quick, and Rabbi Wolk reminded me, because I'm horrible at reminding everybody as well, that put your phones on silent, or vibrate. And it's funny, because as soon as he said it, I had to put mine on, because I'm notorious for forgetting to do that myself.
And your watches, your Apple Watch.
Yeah, your Apple Watches and any other device you have that dings you or buzzes you or whatever. So with that said, I'd like to introduce our panel. So starting from closest to me, Rabbi Ruditsky. Rabbi Ruditsky is the rabbi in the Dach Haverim. I think probably everyone knows Rabbi Wolk. Rabbi Wolk is, I can't give you justice, because I think you're like the rabbi of all sometimes. You're all over. I know you're with JFS and you're a community chaplain, and I feel like you're involved, and everybody knows and loves you.
So we'll keep going.
When it's good stuff, why stop?
Yeah. Well, but it's true, right? Am I right?
Also, Rabbi Emeritus at Congregation Shari Tefillah.
Shari Tefillah. Okay.
I just got a dark cover.
Now, and we have Rabbi Avi Mitzner. Recently got that accomplishment, so we're all proud of Rabbi Mitzner with Congregation Shereth Israel. And then we have Mr. Charles Hirschberg. Charles Hirschberg is one of the heads of the Chevra Kadisha. And those may be some questions that you have as well if you're not familiar with the Chevra Kadisha. It's a very important part of the Jewish ritual with the Tahara and all of the prayers and everything goes in. I won't go into a lot of detail.
I'm also vice president of Dallas Jewish Burial Fund.
Yes. So that's something we are going to introduce today as well and talk about, because and I don't want to steal any thunder, but a lot of the guessing on why cremation is going up, it has a lot to do with cemetery plots becoming ridiculously expensive. So I know, like at Hillcrest, I think they start around $30,000 now. And Restland, you know, is around $7,000-8,000, you know, for a plot. So it's becoming, and then there's cemetery, then the cemeteries have fees on top of that, which is anywhere from another $3,000 to $5,000. Then you have to pay for a funeral. So I know that has a lot to do with it. And so we'll talk about the new organization that has been put in place. But and so with that said, let me start with the questions. I guess the best way to do this is I'll kind of go through the questions, and maybe we just start down the line and we kind of get some feedback and perspectives and go from there. Does that sound good? All right, so the first question that was submitted was, can the remains of cremated Jews be buried in a Jewish cemetery? So, Rabbi Raditsky, you want to start?
Maybe you wanna read all the questions, seriously.
You want me to read them all?
Because I think some of us may wanna talk to
Okay,
overall
okay.
issues rather than.
Okay.
Yeah,
That's what
I
we
also
wrote.
agree, because I think that this first question, while it's important, is probably the tail leading. to
Right.
that.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
Yeah, you're right. Okay,
Right,
okay.
so people get a flavor of the question, you don't
Okay,
have to read all
perfect.
the questions.
And that way, if any of you have these questions, you know that we're going to be asking them. Is it permissible for a rabbi to conduct a funeral for someone who's cremating? What guidance does the Torah provide regarding the practice of cremation? Must the expressed wish of a deceased individual to be cremated be respected? Facing financial constraints for a burial plot, what alternatives or assistance options are available? Can Kaddish be recited for someone who opted for cremation? So this number 7, I'm going to ad-lib on this because I just want to make a quick point. The question was, Judaism references ashes to ashes, dust to dust. What does this mean if not in the context of cremation? Definitely give some perspective from the rabbis and Charles, but just so everyone's aware, that's not a Jewish reference. That's a Christian reference. Ashes to ashes, dust to dust. And I've got links that if you're interested, I can show you so you understand that. That's not in the Torah. That's not part of Judaism. That's a Christian reference. If the scriptures say we must be buried, why can that not include ashes? How can communities foster discussions and provide additional support for those unable to afford traditional burials? Are these organized groups within the Jewish community that regularly visit graves? Are there organized groups that regularly visit graves? Considering our transient society, do people forego burials due to this and prioritize keeping loved ones close? What is the rationale behind the prohibition of cremation in Judaism? Why are some members of the Jewish community opting for cremation? How is the choice of cremation viewed within the Jewish community? Does it impact acceptance by family, rabbis, or the faith? And how does it influence the funeral and mourning process? Before cremation, are bodies still prepared by the Chevra Kadisha? In what ways does the act of cremation affect traditional Jewish beliefs about the afterlife and transitions? So perhaps the best way then would be, let's open it up and we start Rabbi Raditsky, and we want to go through and address some of the questions, and we can kind of go down the line. Does that make sense? Does that work for everyone? All right, so take it away.
Okay, so for me, I wear 3 different hats when I get all of these questions. Before coming here to playing with the Viadat Chaverim, which is a Reform synagogue, I had worked in Virginia Beach. I was the rabbi of a Jewish home like Legacy.
Excuse me, folks, there are chairs up front here.
And so, I've done a lot of work in the area of being a chaplain, like my colleague here, working hospice, community chaplaincy. And as a chaplain, you support the family, whatever they want to do. You don't say to them, well, you should do this because. My Jewish background is conservative. So I have conservative values on a lot of my praxis and beliefs, but as a Reform rabbi, I am mandated, whether someone is buried or cremated, to give them that spiritual support, pastoral care for burial, bereavement, and so forth and so on. So the misnomer in Reform Judaism is that, so Reform Judaism does support cremation. The misnomer is that this was some misguided, how can you do that? How can you break away from tradition? Don't you know what the Torah says attitude? And the reality is that the reformer rabbis of the 19th century, when they looked at this particular topic, they looked at the key verse that says, Kivor tikvarenu yom havu. You shall bury in the first day. And they said it doesn't say goof, it doesn't say body. So there was no explicit command that says you cannot do cremation. Now, the truth is that those words kivor comes from kever, which means grave. So it's implied to bury, but again, this was the reformer view, the reform rabbi's view. But the rabbi could not say no to supporting a family who did cremation because Reform Judaism did not deny the reality of it. It was not a sin. But it's evolved throughout the years. And the way it's evolved is, as a CCAR rabbi, which I'm not, but that's the CCAR protocol, is that a Reform rabbi cannot deny a family the ability to officiate in terms of again, bereavement, memorial, just because they've been cremated. But yet at the same time, Reform rabbis are not encouraged to advocate for cremation anymore. Things have changed. Most of that is post-Holocaust. Like I said, my background is conservative, so I don't have a problem with that. But I would not deny somebody, and there's many reasons why people get cremated. But the reasons in Reform Judaism are more sociological, more to be in continuity with Jewish tradition, but also in terms of how we feel as Jews on the other side of the Holocaust. But the basic view, which will probably differ from my colleagues here, is that we would say theologically, Torah and tradition does not command one not to be cremated, so it's an argument out of silence, so we continue to allow it and support it. It's kind of an overall, I just want to add real quickly, there's two important words, nivul hamet and kavod hamet. Kavod hamet means to honor the dead, nivul hamet means to desecrate the dead. That's a word that's generally applied to organ donation, but again, the rabbis looked at, so they said nivul hamet, this was not a desecration of the body to, again, go with cremation.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you for inviting me to participate. Just jump on your last point. I can't think of a greater nivul hamet, a greater desecration of the body than cremation. That's just not looking at reality. I think I'm not sure, it goes back to the 1800s, the Reform movement making a stand on cremation. I think cremation was in vogue back then, but it says you shall surely bury, and that's where we learn about burying a person as soon as possible. Had they perhaps looked at the verse before that, they would have seen that it's talking about a criminal who was hanged, and even he is deserving of immediate burial. The rabbis explained that if a criminal who was hanged has to be buried with immediacy, how much more so every other person. In Jewish tradition, when a new Jewish community was established, the second institution that was established was a cemetery. The first was a synagogue, incorrect. Huh? A mikvah, a ritual bath, so that marital life could continue. The second was a cemetery, and it was not to bury ashes, it was to bury bodies. But literally at the beginning, chapter 1 in Genesis, God tells us about the creation of human beings. Adam and Eve were not Jewish human beings. They were created b'tselem Elohim, in the image of God. And that's what we show respect to in terms of burying an individual. And I would add that from a perspective of the Torah, even for Gentiles to be cremated, is a desecration. And Gentiles are also created in the image of God, no less than Jews. The first Jewish woman in history passes away, Sarah, and what does Abraham do? He purchases a plot of land to bury Sarah in Hebron. I'm glad Zane made that correction about the ashes to ashes, dust to dust. That's from the Christian common prayer, has nothing to do with Judaism at all. You should always be careful not to make an ash out of yourself making a citation or anything else. We'll just say that the way we show respect in Jewish life is to respect someone during their lifetime, and likewise after they pass away. As many of you know, I'm sure Charles will address it. That's why in terms of the funeral homes, Chevra Kadisha, family requests a shomer, a watchman, watchwoman, could be a woman as well, to stay with the body between death and burial. Zane is always prepared to provide that service. That's a way of showing respect, that even after a person dies, they're not abandoned. A person comes into the world as part of the Jewish community. That's how we escort him or her out of this world. Financial issues, etc., etc. I'm sure Charles will talk about the burial society. But I'll just add one final point, that in many ways, burial is not just for the dead, it's for the living. It's a place for children and grandchildren to go and to visit and to pay respects. One of the questions was, are there organized groups in the Jewish community that regularly visit graves? Every congregation in town, as is customary, has a joint service at the cemetery on a Sunday before the high holidays. We have a communal gathering, part of it being that even individuals who are buried there, who may no longer have family members in town, at least once a year, the grave is visited. Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi Wolf.
Well, thank you, Rabbi Rudisky and Rabbi Wolk. It's wonderful for me going after Rabbi Wolk because, at least in the conservative movement, we start at the same place. We don't necessarily end with everything at the same place, but we start at the same place. I want to add just a little bit onto what Rabbi Wolk was saying, and talking about the shomer giving respect to the body, respect to the mate. Part of the shomer's job while they are sitting with the body is to recite the Tehillim, to recite Psalms, and we do that because the Psalms are of a comfort to the soul, which is said to linger about the body until the deceased is buried. And if you turn that around on the flip side, and you think about what's happening to the soul as if it were witnessing its vessel through life being burned, it must be very distressing to the soul. Burning is an act of violence. We think of when we think of if I looked around this room and I said and I saw a book I didn't like and I said, "Oh, let's have a book burning," everybody would they would have a double take. How can we do that? We can't do that. And so how can we do that kind of violence to the receptacle of our soul for the time of our lives on this earth? So in the conservative movement as well, we don't accept the act of cremation as being valid. We and we always, we always encourage when we can burial. Where we would differ is what happens post fact. And so in the conservative movement, there's a tshuva talking about, so what if, what happens when a person comes to you and says, my father was cremated, right? And can I bury the ashes? And so we look to find cases where it's not going to be apples to apples, of course, but we look to find cases where such things, there may be some sort of precedent. You have the precedent of, and again, they're not apples to apples, but it's a matter of trying to bring comfort to the family after the fact. You have the case where King Saul, he's found hanged. They burn the body and then bury the bones. Now, first of all, just the fact that they bury the bones, so it's not a total cremation. You know, the Radak, Rabbi Doug Kimchi, one of the commentators, he explains that it's possibly because the body had worms coming out of it, and it would have been a disgrace to King Saul. There's that instance, but they bury him after burning, and then there is also, the Talmud talks about that everybody is buried, even if you're executed by the Beit Din, through burning. And so where we would differ is that post fact, somebody comes to us and says, my loved one has been cremated. We would allow, without a ceremony, for the ashes to be buried in the cemetery.
Thank you, Rabbi. Okay. Theologies. I'm just a mister, so opinion, and I'll bring a Dallasite point of view. One of the continuations on that line is, can the remains of cremated Jews be buried in Jewish cemetery? The only cemetery in Dallas that actually has a mausoleum for cremation is Temple Emmanuel's down on Howell Street. They have a wall to retain ashes. That's strictly from the Reformed point of view. Going on, connecting these, and this is more my area. Okay, how is the choice of cremation viewed within the Jewish community? I might like to jump ahead and connect these.
Yeah, no, I think that's what we've been doing, really, is kind of bringing all of them into one.
Does it impact acceptance by family, rabbis, or faith, and how does it influence funeral and mourning process? And before cremation, are bodies still prepared by a Hever Kadisha? If it's cremation, Orthodox level through Dallas Family Services, where we follow the Orthodox procedures, and we know there's cremation, no. There will not be a tahara. You do a tahara out of respect for the body. I'll refer to it as the met. That means body in Hebrew. Show of hands real fast. How many of you know what a tahara is? Okay. So there's several lines. So I'll expand on that. You have a group of friends. It's called the Hever Kadisha. Chesed Shalem. It means Hever, friends. Chesed Shalemus means it's basically an act for somebody or something that cannot be thanked for the act that you're doing. You have friends come in, community members come in, they take the body. It's done with total respect. It's not a mortician who it's a job. Hate to say that they refer to it almost as just a slab of meat. God forbid. We come in, this is a friend. We wash, we care. We wash the hair, we clean the fingernails, we clean the toenails. We make sure the body is in the best condition we can. We then dress it, I'll speak on the men's side. We then dress in the same way as the Kohen Gadol was dressed for Yom Kippur service. It's all in a white linen outfit. My example is, go back to the 70s. I know none of you are old enough to remember going back to the 70s and think of a pure white linen leisure suit. That's about what it was like. It's
Do you have the go-go boots to put on?
no saddle shoes. We handle him or her, but as friends, it's not just a cold business transaction. And that's the whole idea. That's why we're against cremation. You cannot do that knowing that someone was going to be literally burned. I'll bring in the subject that everybody throws out. 6 million of us had no choice on it. Why would you choose to have something that was inflicted on us as a people? I will let somebody else grab the next question.
Well, actually, Charlie, will you also talk about, one of the questions was about, help on plots.
Okay.
Now, what number was that? It was,
Whatever, affected burial.
Okay.
so we talk a little bit about the other organizations.
I would love for you all to come up, take one of these sheets from the Dallas Jewish Burial Fund. This is a group of people who got together, like-minded people, and we saw a problem. The problem is funerals back 20 years ago, you could bury somebody you were under $10,000. The cheapest rack rate now is $17,500. And I'm glad to say Zane happens to fall in that category, his organization. We came together because we realized there's people who are around in their 40s and 50s, and Aunt Sally, mom or dad suddenly passes away. We've got kids in school, religious school, we've got kids in private school, we have kids in college. Where are we gonna come up with basically 20 grand to bury a relative? So they're opting for cremation. I'm gonna disagree with Zane on this. Nationally, it is almost 50% of the Jewish community is cremation.
Yes.
It is Scotland.
Different cities with large Jewish communities.
Dallas happens to have one of the lower percentage rates.
Well, Dallas is about 12%.
Right. So, going with that, we saw an issue needed. There are people who just don't have the money now. Your cards are full. What do you do? We're here at the Dallas Jewish Burial Fund as a bridge loan. If you've gone to Jewish Family Service and you're not indigent, God willing, none of you fall in that category. You're not covered. You go to Dallas Jewish Free Loan Society, you don't have a 700 plus credit rating. You don't fall into their category. We're always the last resort. You come to us, if there's insurance, if there's a way, we'll bridge you to find it. If you need that little bit help, there's some of us you can call. Maybe we can call Zane. Maybe we can come give up Harvard, maybe put the kids in UT. But there's a little bit. Everybody knows.
Harvard's not happening.
That's violence.
Okay, let's say all this tuition.
But we're there to make it a little bit easier on you. I got a call 2 days ago. They need a headstone. That's not something that we give loans for, or help with. But what we can do is help by calling Spalding. I went blank on that. Spradling.
Spalding was the base.
Right. Okay, Spradling, and saying, hey, we have somebody, they need the basic, they can't afford much. We're Jews, we're gonna help each other.
Or Israel Schechter, I think.
And Schechter is another.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That's who I'd recommend, because he knows Hebrew,
Yeah.
he's pretty.
Things can get it quite well. But again, we're Jews, we can help each other. We're here at Dallas Jewish Burial Fund to help the need, where there's need. And if it comes down to it, and it really is a decision between cremation and burial, and the only stumbling block is burial, You tell us what you have to give, and we'll bridge the difference. We do not want that to be the reason for cremation.
Thank you, Charlie. And to his point, not to put my personal beliefs in it, but I'm also not a cremation fan, but I can't, in the position we're in, we can't tell people no. We typically, when anyone asks me, I always tell them to go talk to the rabbi. And oftentimes I've had people call Charlie, I've had people call Agam, I'm sure people talk to Rabbi Wolk about it, because I would rather they get the perspective from that. That's way above my pay grade. And so I'd much rather these folks be the go-to. One of the questions I want to address and wasn't addressed was, must the express wish of a deceased individual to be cremated be respected? So we didn't bring an attorney in here. Michael Cohen is usually my go-to guy. Everyone, a lot of people probably know him. He's outstanding, a state attorney. He would be able to answer this a lot better than probably a lot of this. However, I know Rabbi Wolk and Avi both are very well versed in ethical wills, and so probably some of this may fall in their wheelhouse. But our perspective is, if somebody comes in and they have all the legal documents completed through the state of Texas, the final dispositions of remains that are signed by them, completed by them, and they've pre-arranged their funeral service, we cannot legally change that. And this has happened before, and this is, I'll give a plug real quick on pre-planning. One of the biggest areas that we push is for families to plan ahead. And while it might seem like, yeah, I want you guys to pay all this up front, pay me, it goes way beyond that. There's so many different implications that happen, and when families don't have plans in place, it leads to arguments, dissension. It leads to there's a lot more. It's almost like pouring salt in an open wound, because your loved one just passed away. Now we got to hurry up and bury him. We got to figure all this out. Especially if you have family members that are differing. You may have one set of family members that are more observant and are anti-cremation. But guess what? Dad told me on his dying breath that he wants to be cremated. Now you have a fight going on. I'm out on that. We're not gonna get in the middle of it. And from a legal perspective, if they've completed all those documents, and please jump it. I'm gonna leave it to you after I say this, because I'm talking out of complete ignorance. I'm thinking there may not be any way out of it, but I could be wrong. So, would one of you like to take that up? I think you might be able to answer it better.
Also, use this opportunity to encourage people. Pre-planning, I agree 100%. The arrangements to be made, obviously discuss with family members, discuss with the rabbi. If a person is not a member of the congregation, that's where the community chaplain comes in. So you don't have to go through what you just described. God forbid somebody dies and we got to run down to the funeral home and sign papers. Also, in terms of papers, we certainly encourage people to have an advanced health directive, a living health will. What kind of decisions should be made? I have my card here. Afterwards, if you want to take my card and contact me, I can send you advanced health directive that, besides meeting state requirements, meets the traditions of Judaism and different choices that a person has. Apropos of that, you mentioned Nivul Hames, desecrating the dead, but there are exceptions. We're very strong proponents of organ donations. There are organizations you can join that promote organ donations within the Jewish community. Big mitzvah, and we're prepared to delay burial because we want to harvest an organ for a recipient. That's the key point, for a recipient. We do not allow a person to donate their body to science. There's no shortage of that. But the idea is, if a person can save a life, whether it's via kidney transplant, heart transplant, or corneal transplant, because according to Jewish law, someone who is blind is considered in a life-threatening situation. They could fall down the stairs in their home, they could step off the curb, get hit by a car. So big mitzvah. There is, I don't know if it's here on Sunday coming up or Shari Tefillah, swabbing for testing. Is it here?
Great
Yeah,
segue.
speak about it at the end.
Oh, okay. 6 people, right? Right now, 6 people in the
Yes.
Jewish community who need a kidney transplant. Big mitzvah. And to harvest an organ from a deceased donor, that is not considered desecrating the dead. Saving a life has a higher priority. It was mentioned about one of the modes of the death penalty given millennia ago by Jewish courts very frequently was burning, but it wasn't cremation. The criminal would consume molten lead to kill him. The body was intact, and then the person was buried. But again, the Torah in Deuteronomy teaches us the importance of burial from the case of a criminal. Okay, so that element gets burial. Certainly, everyone else. A number of years ago, I officiated at the funeral of a Jewish man who was executed by the state of Texas. Remember that? Okay, so even he got burial. Okay,
Well, didn't we just did the one,
We did another one.
another one, yes, yeah. Okay.
Thank you, Rabbi Wolk. And before, I want to give everyone another opportunity to speak. Before I do that, Rabbi Wolk, will you answer another question? Because we heard the perspective from Reform, Conservative.
Oh, let me add one thing. You asked also about the wishes of the deceased.
Yes.
Okay, so if it's in the will, then obviously there are legal issues, so I'm not addressing that, okay?
Sure.
But even if a person expresses verbally their wish to be cremated, okay? You try to talk them out of it. But if you're not able to, from a point of view of Jewish law, you're allowed to lie to the person and say, yes, Dad, when the time comes, we're gonna cremate you, and then we bury the person. But why? We believe down deep every Jew wants to do the right thing. But somehow this Mishigas got into his head. He wants to be cremated, blah, blah, it's too expensive. Whatever the reasons are, there are books written that debunk a lot of these arguments. You're even allowed to lie to the person and then bury them properly. And we believe in the next world that their soul will thank the family members by doing the right thing for the person.
Thank
I
you.
wanna jump in. I
Okay, go ahead.
wanna jump in on the same topic. So, I appreciate that. You know what that reminds me of? That if somebody's terminally ill and you visit them, you don't have to tell them who's dying because you don't wanna cause them more suffering. That's permitted in Jewish law as well. But in the Reformed Jewish responsa, it actually says that if a family, if the father requests to be cremated or the mother requests to be cremated, because this was more specific to the question, I want to make sure I answer it as well. The children could reverse it if it goes against their conscience. So, when we started talking, sometimes going first is really dangerous, because you don't know what to say or how to say it. But Reformed Judaism doesn't look at the written Torah as not valid. Beslam Elohim is very important to all Jews, so forth and so on. Not everyone reads the Torah as black and white, or every single word is still extant, and so forth and so on. And the reality is, again, before being in the synagogue, I've worked for many years in hospitals with JFS in different areas, and have had the privilege to work with Jews of all different types of backgrounds. I met Reformed Jews who were cremated. I met a lot of conservative Jews who were cremated, and I met my share of Orthodox Jews that chose cremation. Whether it was financial or deep down inside, they went to an Orthodox synagogue because they were raised that way, but for the end of life, they didn't have the same conviction. And the reality is that I appreciate the passion, because look at my background again is conservative. I don't advocate for cremation. I will not. My reason more has to do with the fact that, I'm not going to advocate that we burn somebody's body. That's what they did to our families in the Holocaust. I can't do that. But at the same time, I have to realize that not everyone's gonna look at the words and say, this is what it says. They might have a tradition, and they might not. At the end of the day, I wanna honor the person where they're at. And if they advocate for cremation, will I try to talk them out of it? I have talked Jews out of cremation. Yes, I will, and I will give them the reason. But at the end of the day, I'm not gonna deny them because they choose to be creative. I guess what I'm trying to say here is that it would be a mistake to think that Reform Judaism is not concerned about the tradition or the text. Again, and I think that's, my father gets cremated, I can tell the rabbi I don't want it. Now, obviously, at the end of the day, you're signing a contract with the mortuary and so forth and so on, and that might be out of their hands, but we allow for a family to seek a reversal if it's against their conscience.
Thank you. Well, I do feel better because I lied to my mom because she tried to mumble that she wanted to be cremated, and I buried her. So I feel better now. Honestly, it's something I've always thought about. And my brothers, my sisters would laugh about it, because I think she was getting cuckoo, towards the end. So, and I wasn't going to cremate her. Yeah, I mean, I did all.
Zane, if I could turn this around and have you answer the question, what I would like to know from you, because you may have more knowledge in this. When I look at, we have such an emphasis today on being green. And when I look at the essence of a Jewish burial, I say there can hardly be anything more green than that.
Absolutely.
I understand that there are some people who are concerned about the taking up of land, although I think that's been pretty well debunked. But I mean, it's not going to happen. But the idea that everything, from the casket to the shroud to the body, so everything is supposed to decompose and is supposed to return to the earth from which it came. Can you talk to us about what kind of emissions happen in a cremation?
I have Jewish funeral homes, so I don't have a crematory. That'd be kind of an oxymoron.
But you probably know.
But I've been around. And if you drive by one, it's just a constant smokestack. So, there's no other way of putting it. And so I can't imagine. I can't answer to the detail of what specific emissions, but you go in there, you can't help but realize that whatever emissions are certainly going out in the sky, because you can physically see it. You go by any crematory and just see constant all day long what's going on. And I mean, it's also a very dark and remembrance of the Holocaust too, when you go by those crematories. So it's sort of a double-edged sword in my opinion.
Especially if someone gave up smoking to then have a smokestack.
Right.
Make a comment.
Sure.
I've read that some places in Asia, they're developing other ways of cremating using water. Would you all feel as strongly if there was a different way of cremating?
What was the question? I'm sorry, what was the-
How does that work?
I don't know how it works, but
It's liquid
Water
mulching.
What was the question?
they're developing new ways of cremating that don't involve fire, that involve water and different things. Would you be as strongly against it if it were a different method?
If I can grab that one. You're talking about the liquid mulching is what it is. It basically,
I think they just banned it temporarily.
yeah, here they did.
Yeah.
It uses chemicals to do it, to accelerate it.
It may not be that.
And, they take, and the one in Asia they're using, they actually use heat to increase the decomposition, then they use that for fertilization on land. Going back to, people have heard me state this before if they've met me, and I've done a few of these. The green effect on cremation. The carbon footprint on cremation is over 20 years of your life. That means your driving, your cooking, your everything else is happening with that cremation. It is not good for the environment at all.
That's the wrong person.
I'm just in this. Okay.
Thanks, Javi, for pointing that out.
Stepping a little
I'm here
further,
all day.
the strongest movement in the United States is the green burial. The green burial's basically prototype is the Jewish burials. As the Rabbi Zane said, everything we do is for decomposition. We're borrowing this life form, this body we're using. We're using nutrients. It took nutrients to create us. I won't get into sperm and egg, read the book. But it starts out, we grow and we absorb nutrients. The amount of nutrients in one body as it decomposes into earth is enough to fertilize over an acre of land for growing 2 seasons.
And the shroud's biodegradable.
Correct.
We don't use any chemicals for burials, no embalming,
No metal,
no metal,
no
caskets,
embalming.
all wood.
nothing. It's every bit organic.
The
We're not- We're not
only
like,
thing outside of that is most of the cemeteries here require a concrete box. And that concrete liner is bottomless, so the casket's still touching the earth, and so you're still getting the same religious value and process.
I
the reason
thank
they
Rabbi
require-
Wolk for that.
What's that?
Thank Rabbi Wolk for the bottomless.
Yeah.
Myself and Rabbi Roden actually.
And
brought
and
that.
the reason that they require the concrete liners, it's a perpetual care type of deal. Because what happens is over time, as the body decomposes, if there's not a liner to protect the earth, there's going to be a cavity down there, and it can be a safety issue. If you look at a lot of old country cemeteries and you see where the everything is it's sort of like this. And you see the monuments falling over, and it's because a lot of them didn't necessarily require outer burial containers, and those concrete liners just protect, the earth and protect
It's just for aesthetics. I mean, the
It's
oldest
an asset
cemeteries in
from-
Dallas,
Exactly.
Calvin Road, they don't have it. Sparkman, Hillcrest, Westland, I wanna make sure I insult all of them. They want, it's easier to mow the lawn.
Well, because Spark
They
Road's
want it to
selling
look
$30,000
nicer than the
plot.
Some
infield
of
than
it's state
the
law.
Ranger Stadium. It's just aesthetics.
Some of it stay low.
But we worked that out, the bottom, so everything. And we just add about, as Charles mentioned, and you mentioned as well about the casket and the shrouds. There's also an element of, we treat all members of the Jewish community equally, equal element of respect. Whether the person was a leader in the community, I don't know, the mayor of the city, or he cleaned the streets. So death, the great equalizer. Okay, that's the reason, one of the reasons behind a plain casket. The guy's being buried on Monday in the Cadillacs of caskets, and on Tuesday, a guy being buried in a plain box. People say, he couldn't afford it. And clothing is one of the things that distinguishes people during our lifetime. More expensive clothing, less expensive clothing, people wear that's in style. People wear clothing, I hope it comes back into style, you know how it works. So someone dies, God forbid, we treat everyone the same way, the same shrouds, we don't make those distinctions. They're very much affirming the idea of each person being created in the image of God, and we don't make any distinctions between
So
people.
let me do the other side. I gotta do the other side of that. I did a funeral in California, and the guy that I did the funeral for, he was dressed in a Tommy Bahama shirt, khakis, and sandals, and one of those white type of Cuban type of hats. Because his family had the attitude, and I had worked with him for 4 years on hospice. He took a very fast decline, and he was very much an individual. And he didn't want the shrub. So at the same time, and I appreciate that tradition, whether you're rich or poor, everyone is born the same, everybody dies the same. But I think the other side of that argument is the reason why people dress the way they do, and also respecting the person as an individual. And so there's two sides to that coin. I just wanted to throw that in.
Maybe two sides to the coin, but that's not the Jewish traditional approach.
Yeah, but not
That's
every,
enough,
but
that's
not,
enough,
but not,
fine, it's
but
a
not,
free
but
country.
not everyone is gonna go with
It can be buried with a teddy bear.
But you know,
But,
wait,
but just, but make it clear, that's what, be intellectually honest and
Yes,
make
it
it
is
clear.
tradition.
Okay,
But
that's
it's
it.
al- but it's
Somebody
also-
wants to deviate from the tradition,
But
go right
it's
ahead.
also tradition that we don't cremate. That's
Yeah,
also
correct, that's
tradition.
right.
But
That's
there are
right.
people that have gone against tradition because they understand tradition differently. So tradition has different variants.
Okay, so say it's against tradition. So if
No, I won't say
if
it's against.
Reform rabbis, Reform rabbis would stick up for principles, they would say, we do not encourage cremation, we're not gonna officiate at a cremation. That's a way to stem the tide.
No,
If rabbis would not officiate at a cremation, people would be less encouraged.
Wait a second, your point is very articulate,
Thank you.
okay? But you know what? Not everybody, as Reform rabbis, we don't agree.
I understand,
We
that's
have a
fine.
different way to see the world.
I understand
We have a
that.
different understanding of Torah, tradition, halakhic
That's
points,
fine.
and so forth and so on. It's not a matter of intellectual dishonesty.
No, but
It's,
just, it's not,
it's my turn.
Okay,
It's
go
my
ahead.
turn. It's my turn. Okay, it's my turn.
that's why I wanted to sit next to you.
Yes. This is, being that I've only been here 6 months, I'm kind of like the new kid on the block, so I'm trying to work my way in, so this is a good man to sit next to. But it's not a matter of intellectual dishonesty. It's a matter of being fully honest that we approach the tradition differently, that we
Okay,
approach the Torah
That's clear,
differently,
good.
and so forth and so on. So if somebody does not want to wear a shroud, and they want to wear a Tommy Bahama shirt and khakis and sandals, you know what? We are going to celebrate their individual. But believe me, this guy was an individual.
It may be because they know it's gonna be hot where they're going.
This conversation, anybody ever watch Curb Your Enthusiasm?
Yeah.
One of my favorite episodes is at the funeral, and he sees the golf clubs that he let his buddy borrow, and he's like, what? He's trying to bury my golf club. You remember that?
Yes, that was a great show.
Eventual sand trap.
I think Karen had her hand up, and this lady in the black and white.
So
Karen,
I just
go
wanna
ahead.
make the point
Yes.
that burning the body is not the end of cremation. What happens because the body is not reduced totally to ashes, they have to then pulverize the bones. So it's a very violent process. It's not just, it doesn't just end with burning the body.
You're right, and I am familiar with how that works. But once the cremation is completed, then they ground them up and to make them a fine, to fine them, because when the cremation is completed, there's still a lot of bones left, and so they do all that, and then they vacuum them out of the receptacle. So then you're putting a vacuum cleaner on top of that, and then placed in a
So
bag.
the other question is, would a conservative or Orthodox rabbi perform a service for cremation? Well, I don't.
Why don't we, let's, Rabbi Wolk start with that, because I think Rabbi Nitzgeri mentioned.
We have to.
Yes.
Yeah, I
And Avi
received calls
mentioned
of
too.
Jewish family service, unfortunately not infrequently. Rabbi, mother passed away or she's close to death, father, would you officiate at the service? Once they use the word service, that's a red flag to me, rather than using the word funeral. Okay, what do you mean by I know it's coming, a cremation. So I try to talk them out of it. Sometimes I'm successful, sometimes I'm not. I do not participate in that. I'll give them the name of 1 or 2 rabbis in town who may help them, but I don't participate in that. Just like even when there's a burial, I will only officiate at a funeral where there's a tahara done, where the body is prepared spiritually, ritually rather, for burial.
But somebody else does.
Somewhat?
You always get someone else to take care of the ones you don't wanna do.
Yeah, I said, I'll give them 1 or 2 names, huh?
So we
Yeah,
have a list of we know at the funeral home which rabbis,
Right.
It's like
will,
when you
which
marry
rabbis
out
won't.
of faith, they always find a rabbi that will do it.
Yeah, that's a sad commentary, isn't it?
The way it is. But
You
some
think
of
about
them-
it, that's
But
really,
some
that's worse than a
rabbis-
funeral, cause they're burying 2
But
people.
some Reform rabbis will not marry interfaith.
We have another question.
That's another
The
topic.
young lady in the
That's
black and
next-
white.
That's the next thing.
Go ahead.
It's really just to clarify that in the reform, that cremation is accepted.
Cremation is accepted, but it is not advocated for.
I understand that, but if somebody makes the decision, a reformed rabbi will officiate or whatever for a cremation.
Yeah, then it's about serving the family.
Okay.
Yeah.
And, I understand all the things about the Holocaust and why this is such a difficult situation. And the Holocaust, you had no choice. We understand that. And there's a lot of people here, and like you quoted percentages, up to 50% now. The fact that people have a choice makes it different. Again, whether you're Orthodox or Reformed or conservative, but because we have a choice now, it's not at the same level of the Holocaust. Or it can be
Agreed.
looked at not at the same level.
As a former rabbi, I will not advocate for that very reason. I will not advocate for
That's
cremation and try
fine.
to talk someone
I'm
out of it.
speaking more to the people who are here, that maybe they're here to find out if it is okay or whatever. But that's, now, do you
Can I
have
just
to
say one
be,
thing? Okay and allowable are two different things.
it's allowable.
It's allowable because at the end of the day, but it's not something that we say is okay.
Okay, it's okay for some people, not for you.
It's, you know what, a rabbi.
And let me jump on that real quick, cause I,
It's gonna answer my question.
I'm with a lot of the rabbis, you know, the reform rabbis, it's really not just Rabbi Ruditsky. All the rabbis, the reform rabbis have, cause we've had this discussion, right? Cause I feel like with my business, I feel like I really work for the rabbis, and I try and, you know, take what their feedback and, you know, and implement, you know, the way that they want, if they were running the funeral home, how they would wanna run it. And one of the meetings I had with all the rabbis was this very question about how we handle cremation and things like that. And I will say that while some, if they had differing opinions, they didn't tell me, the general feedback was exactly what Rabbi Ruditsky is saying. So it's, you know, so it was kind of a,
Do you have to be a member of the temple to have the rabbi?
we have rabbis that take care of unaffiliated families. I know Rabbi Ruditsky will see unaffiliated families. So we definitely refer out for those situations.
You don't have to be a member of the congregation to die. That's
Rabbi Wolf is usually our first call.
One more question, somebody said Temple Emmanuel is the only one that has a law for cremation. Do you have to be a member of Temple Emmanuel?
I think they sell to non-members the cremation section. They have, I think they sell non-members in other sections too. And Avi, I know you mentioned that you guys would bury cremated remains. Do you sell to non-members that share the Dolphin Road?
So, all right, so now we're getting into a little, we only bury cremated remains when people come to us after the fact and say, I'm not going to sell a plot for the purpose, but,
Fair enough.
Henry, I'm not aware of what your company is or whatever it's called.
Oh, so I own Dallas Jewish Funerals. We're a funeral home. We're the only Jewish
And
funeral
where
home
are
in Dallas.
you?
In Plano. So we handle all the burials.
I've never even heard of you, I'm so sorry.
Wow, really? Has anyone else never heard Dallas Jewish Funerals? Okay. Shelby?
Actually, but Marilyn had her hand up, and then.
Shelby, you need to get on that. Sir, yes. Yeah, pretend that you never heard of Sparkling Hillcrest.
I know. I swear to God. Oh, but you
Twice
go
as much
there.
as I am, but for the same thing. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, my question first was to the yard site. I consulted a Lubavitch rabbi and also a Neurolog rabbi, and I got two responses for the yard site. One is saying that you consider it when she died. I'm talking about my wife. And the second one, you consider the starting point when you bury So which one is correct?
How to determine the yard site is the anniversary of the death that's observed each year. Okay, so you're asking me? So the yard site is observed on the day of death, okay? The only exception is if burial takes place 3 or more days after the person passed away, then the first year the yard site is on the day of burial. Thereafter, it's always the day of death. So the answer is the day of death.
Okay. All right, that's the loophole, which is fine.
Okay,
Thank you.
you're welcome, sure.
So nothing's been mentioned about mausoleums. I have a cousin who was buried in a mausoleum. I've never been to a service like that. So what is the perspective? The body was not burned. It was in a plain fine casket and put into this wall
Well,
rather than the dirt.
for starters, Spark and Press requires the body to be embalmed to go into a mausoleum, and most mausoleums require that for just. I won't go into details. We'll say sanitary reasons. So that right there completely takes away from traditional Jewish burial, just because Jews don't embalm. It's not natural.
But that's not against
No, they
reform,
have
right?
reform rabbi perform a service for this.
I mean, everybody, how many days does it have to be to your embalming?
Well, I don't do embalming, so I would. Again, I only take care of Jewish families.
Still need to be buried according to Jewish law, even if it's 2 years later.
Well, they used to, they had their own cemetery.
Yeah.
So they have their own rules.
Right. But would anyone like to address the embalming?
She has a question.
Okay.
I didn't hear it addressed. When you have someone that requests that their ashes be strewn over water, what is your feeling about that?
Only at Jones Beach.
Pardon me?
Only at Jones Beach.
Well, it goes back to the bigger.
Trinity River would be appropriate. Not mixing religions, not the Trinity River.
It goes back to the bigger question of, do you even believe in cremation? Because whether you bury the remains or put them over a river or a mountain, if you're not for cremation, it doesn't really matter. I mean, I do know, I believe when I was living in California, somebody told me who had cremains and wanted to put them someplace that was actually illegal. They couldn't put it in the water, but they did it anyway because that's what they wanted to do. But I think that's kind of like the step B. The first step is, will you cremate them? So I think it depends on the person, where they want to do with the ashes if they choose to do that. I think there's any hard, fast rule.
There's no hard and fast rule.
I'm gonna step back to the embalming question. As I'll answer as part of the Heber Kadisha. We will do a tahar on somebody who's been embalmed because a lot of times it wasn't their choice. It depends the funeral parlor. Some of them
Also, sometimes if they're transported
across state lines.
Well, and actually, that's just to jump on that. That's not if a funeral ever tells you that they have to embalm to go over state lines, it's not true.
Even to Israel.
Even to Israel.
But
So
shipped
embalming.
to or from Mexico.
Mexico,
That's
it
tequila.
does.
As long as you're inside of the
That's
border.
tequila, that's not embalming.
We don't use embalming. We use Patron, you know, for those. No, but across state lines, it's not. So if you have a loved one that passes away out of state, don't call me, and I'll call
At
the
least
funeral
that guy's
home
coming
if I need to.
just to make sure.
It's I think sometimes it turns into a moneymaker for the funeral homes.
Right.
They'll charge a couple $1,000
Yeah.
extra. So yeah. Yes, ma'am.
You mentioned real quickly donating your body to UT Southwestern or something like that. Is that a total no-no?
They'll only take healthy looking bodies now. They have such a glut.
Yeah,
There's
and
no
when they're
shortage.
done,
It's a
with
big
you,
mitzvah
they're
to donate
cremated.
an organ to a recipient, big mitzvah to do that.
When you're a live organ?
Or a deceased donor.
But but not your whole body, don't know.
No, to keep people alive, we do it. Like Charles said, there's no shortage of bodies.
I would, replying again on the money. During Tahara, we go as far as if it was a car wreck, we have people who go out to gather to examine blood. So we save everything, that's why we do not endorse them all. You want as much as you can.
Exactly,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So right now, yeah.
Even if someone had a part amputated, you know, they're supposed to hold on to that part and have it buried with them.
Oh, I thought it was buried.
The organ, the limb is buried,
Oh, the
and
limb is
then they're
buried.
buried with,
And then-
Yeah, they buried it.
that's a limb, exterior limb, not
Yeah.
like a appendix or
Yeah.
tonsil or something. A leg, an arm, God forbid, yeah.
You don't have to hang on to your teeth with a baby or anything?
No, it's not considered a limb.
Okay.
Alan, do you still have a question, or you had your hand up before?
I did.
Yeah, a second ago, okay. No problem.
Any other final comments from any of the panels?
Just hacking them.
Well, listen, I appreciate everybody coming. We're gonna hang out for a little bit. I don't wanna speak for rabbis. Oh, and one more question?
Yes. One question, this is an announcement.
Okay.
So this is in the spirit of Pikuach Nefesh, saving a life, so, we have, as was mentioned earlier, an event that's gonna happen here at the JCC a week from this Sunday, January 28th. We have 6 people that have been identified in the Jewish community. This started out with 1 person, and it grew to 6 people who need kidney transplants. So a factoid for Texas, do you know why there are more available cadaver donors in Texas? Because Texas doesn't have a helmet law. There you go. So you have freedom, your freedom. So the issue though, for people who need a kidney transplant, it's really important for it to be a live donor. When you have a cadaver donor, then there's likelihood that you're gonna have to have another transplant another time. The age that you can become a donor is up to age 70. If you have relatives, no matter where they are in the country, that would be interested in being a donor and saving a life, please take one of these flyers, contact them. We have digital flyers if you'd be interested in sending it out on social media. Worldwide, we have this organization renewal that coordinates an effort to find kidney donors. It's a very simple technique, they swab and that's it. All the medical expenses for the donor are taken care of by the organization, by insurance. So it's an incredible mitzvah. So thank you.
Again, thank you everybody for coming and rabbis, Charlie, thank you. I really, you know, we did this on purpose, having representation from every level of Judaism and the discussions, whether, you know, they're heated, they're not, is important, right? Because we want to get through this, we want to have discussion, everyone's in favor of this person, so. Sure. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.